I'm delighted to be here, and like the title says, I am presenting and just speaking with you all. I kind of am just a really laid back person, so just want to just have a kind of back and forth dialogue. But my main purpose is just to share with you all the experiences and the lessons that I've learned as a practitioner in home health. And like my bio says, I have worked in a lot of settings. And so I initially, when I got done, when I graduated in 2005. And so when I got done with grad school, I worked in my district where I went to high school in Kalamazoo. I don't know if any of you all have heard of Kalamazoo, Michigan, but that's where I grew up. And after that, I decided I wanted to be a traveler. And so I did that. And I ended up in Chicago, and I still live here, of course, but in my work, I just wanted to, one of the things that I noticed because I worked in skilled nursing is just the way that the setting was going in skilled nursing for me. I just did not like it. I didn't like the politics. I was working in Indiana. So I worked, it was a particular company, but they had, of course, you know how they have buildings. They had a building in Chicago, a couple of buildings in Chicago and Indiana. And I lived right at the border. So I had a license in Indiana and in Illinois. And just, I saw the direction that skilled nursing was going. And as a practitioner for me, I just wanted to have more of a personal interaction, and just wanted to, I see myself when I come in and I work with patients. I feel like as a practitioner that we have a duty to give our best selves, right? And you're not just there just treating, or just treating for speech pathology, but in the time that you have together, you're also developing a relationship. And I have found for myself that as I build the rapport, I have a lot of good connections with my patients. and a lot of that is just because of just building rapport with them. And so I really believe in speaking to the total person. So that's a little bit of just about, I'm going to go in a little bit more about that a little bit later, because that's going to be a little bit towards the end. But I just wanted to talk to you first a little bit about AAC, right? How many of you all have experience with AAC? Or how many of you all work in home health? Okay. All right. So one of the things that I noticed when just working in home health was just, I used to be terrified of just wanting to get in and working with AAC. When I would get an AAC eval, I would be so nervous, and I would just, pass it. And it's not like there's many of us in this, in home, in home health. And I think a lot of times, a lot of us tend to, when we get into situations that we're not familiar with, right, we tend to kind of shy away from that. And like, oh, I'll put that in the closet and come back to it. But if you know anything about home health, you know that it's going to come back and circle around. And so I remember getting my first patient and just with AAC, and having to just go through the whole process. And I didn't have the best representative from the company. So I've worked with two companies, Dynavox and Lingraphica. And initially I started with Dynavox. So how many of you all are familiar with the products of Dynavox? They're very popular, so I'm sure you all have heard of them. And so I remember the first representative that I had. Once you go in and you do your evaluation, you also have to do a AAC evaluation. So initially when I come in to see a patient, I'm doing a regular evaluation. And of course, from the regular evaluation, that's when you learn the needs of the patient. And the way that they had it at the time, you go and you do the eval, of course, and then I would have to call the representative and schedule a time that the representative can come in and evaluate the patient with me. And, trying to get schedules, if you all have any experience with schedules, scheduling can be something that's, very hard. So, you have a representative that is in charge of a big area, and so that was always really hard. So I always really hated it. And then I felt like my representative wasn't as knowledgeable as knowledgeable about actually you. I mean, he was knowledgeable, but I didn't feel like the representative could give me exactly what I needed. So I always really hated, getting these, getting AAC evals. But what I have learned is that the more that I just kind of uh, dived into it, the more comfortable I've gotten. I would say Dynavox is probably one of the more complicated for me, and not just for me, but just talking about patients. And so I work in the area that I work in inner city Chicago. Okay. And so when we're talking about just population, a lot of, most of my patients are Black. Okay. Inner city Chicago, a lot, when we come to talk about AAC, a lot of families are not educated, and they tend to shy away too. If I'm the therapist and I'm shying away, I don't blame them for shying away. And so what I found, and one of the what I found is that, you have to do a lot of educating. And that's what we have to do, of course, in our fields, but not only educating, but modeling for them how, the device can actually benefit their life and simplify their life. And so, I would go in and I would have families that literally did not necessarily want to use some of these devices, which I understood. However, the more that I incorporated, or the more that I had the family come in, because if you've ever done home health, you know that a lot of times the families are like, okay, there's the patient and they want to go out the door. But the thing about AAC is that they're the ones that's going to be facilitating and helping the patient with how to use the device. I'm sorry, if there's any questions, go ahead and, raise your hand. I don't want to, if you have any questions, you can just ask them, at the time, and you don't have to wait to the end. So, anyways, they like to go out. And so a lot of times it's not only easier for you as a practitioner, but it's easier, as a practitioner, but it's also easier for the patient once you have the family involved. And a lot of times families want to shy away. And what I have learned in just working in, underserved communities, is that, our people, they don't necessarily want to use the communication devices. They don't see that there is a need for it. And so, a lot of times when you come in, they're kind of looking, they've had different experiences with different allied health workers. And so when you come in, they're kind of looking sometimes at me like, okay, what are you going to do? They look at me and they're like, great, it's a sister, but they're, from their experiences that they may have had with different therapists, they're kind of looking like, okay, you're just going to go in and you're just going to, you're just going to come in and then you're going to do your job, you're going to get paid and leave. And that is just why building rapport is so important. And so one of the things that I've just learned is just really connecting with my patients and family and letting them, know like, here, I'm here to serve you. And I think that people can sense that, people can sense that in your calls. People can sense that, with following up, and so I have found that building rapport has just build trust. When you're building rapport, you're building trust. And when you're incorporating the family, they feel like, hey, she's not just here to get a check. She's not just here to have you sign your paper. She's actually here to help us. And that has opened up the door for me to create a lot of relationships, not just with my patients, but just with people in the community. Because a lot of times what happens is that, they'll say, oh, I have a family member that's having home health. I told them about you. And what ends up happening is, that person actually moves to the company that I'm with because they want me to be their therapist. And so if there's anything that I have learned, is just building that rapport is just so important. And I think that people can see if you have compassion. People can see, if you're just, like I said, want to, come in and then go out. If you're following up, are you doing what you say you're going to do? Of course, we all know as therapists that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. We have a lot of paperwork, but and sometimes things can get behind, but following up and not just following up with our patients, but a lot of times what happens to me is they'll say, hey, this therapist did not come in, or this, I don't like this therapist. And with with everything that's kind of going on in the world, with Black Lives Matter, with, everything that's been kind of going on with this pandemic, what I've been really finding is that not only am I a therapist, but I am an advocate for my patients. A lot of the therapists that I work with are of different ethnic backgrounds. And unfortunately, I hate saying this, but it is the truth. And this is a safe space for that we can share. But I feel like, not even just feel like, I have experienced that therapists have come in of different ethnic backgrounds, different races, and have taken advantage of my Black patients, and so they have, which is something that really teased me off, right? And so, whether they're there and they're only there for 15 minutes, things like that. And the patient doesn't necessarily know, they don't know how home health works, and so, as a therapist, a Black therapist, and I see that these are the things that are happening, or I see that, I work with a lot of different companies. So what I will see is that a company will take a patient and they only want to give them 2 or 3, visits. And they want to give the visits more to PT. So of course I'm advocating for S.T., but of course I end up having to talk with the patient and let them know this is how it works in home health, and so a lot of times it kind of puts me in a predicament, but I don't care. I'm just really passionate about educating my patients, educating the family on OT, PT, and ST, what they're supposed to be doing. They don't know how, they don't know how long people are supposed to be there. All of these things have an effect on the experience for the patient. And so, I just this summer, I had a situation where the patient said, I feel like because I'm Black, that they're treating me a certain way, and that was, and it's my responsibility to report that, right? And so I call the agency and I say, hey, this is what's going on. You all need to handle this. They need to be treated with respect. They need to be, the therapists need to service them with the amount of time. You can't just come in for 10 minutes and leave, and so it puts me in some positions, but I really don't, I really don't care. But what I have really learned is just that people are not always nice in I'm not saying just as speech therapists, but just when you're talking about the overall allied health fields, I have just seen that, these things wouldn't be happening if these patients were in an upper scale neighborhood. You would not be mistreating them, or you would not be giving them one visit before the episode is over. If this was if this patient was of a different race or educational background. And so not only do I find myself treating the patient, but actually as an advocate, an activist for the patient. And it's our responsibility to take care of all our patients, but not just our patients, but these are, Black brothers and sisters. And so that's how I look at it. They are my patients, but I feel like we have a responsibility because in some of our communities, the lack of education is there. And sometimes you may be the only educational voice, and so you have to step in, and this causes, it causes you to have some interesting interesting situations when it comes to business, but that's okay. Are there any questions so far?
I just wanted to say, because I work with early intervention, so I would consider myself also a home speech language pathologist,
Mm-hmm.
home base. But I do agree with you that sometimes therapists do take advantage of Latinos and African Americans, people of color.
Mm-hmm.
So when I first come in to do therapy, the first thing I do is read their mandates to them to let
Mm-hmm.
them know, your child has speech therapy with me 2 times a week. Do you have the record forms with you too?
Mm-hmm.
If they say no, then I give them a copy so they can see exactly when I come in, the days
Mm-hmm.
and times that I come in the mandate, as well as any OTPT. So that that way I'm educating them indirectly to let them know that
Mm-hmm.
this is the days and the times that they're supposed to
Exactly.
come in, because I also see myself as an advocate
Mm-hmm.
um for patients as well. And when I
Mm-hmm.
teach my students, also I let them know too that
Mm-hmm.
we always are responsible to give them the amount of time that they're supposed to give, because the consequence is that you could lose your license because
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
fraud. So I
Mm-hmm.
make sure that my students know that, and I make sure for myself not only to protect the clients but protect myself too, because I work
Mm-hmm.
too hard, too
Right.
damn hard to
Right.
get a degree and then to get a
Mm-hmm.
license and then lose it because I want to be greedy.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Exactly.
definitely agree with you. Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've also noticed another, and these are all respect issues, right? These are issues that have to, like, if you respect or if you see somebody if you have compassion for a person, if you can see yourself in them, right, then you're not going to act in these manners. And so a lot of times um, you know, I'll have these situations where the patient is complaining and they're saying, hey, this person is just showing up at my house, and I have to talk to patients. I'm like, look, Black people, you just don't show up at their house. They're not going to let you in. Okay. They're not even, even if they know you and you just show up and you don't call, most of the time you're not going to be let in. And so I see the big cultural, I see the big cultural, issue that goes on because some of the therapists are of different ethnic backgrounds, and I let them know, hey, they are supposed to call you ahead of time. They're not, but that again, that goes back to respect. If you respect somebody, you respect their time. If you're not going to, these all seem like things that we should know, right? And I'm just not talking about just ST, right? But it's just, especially in this climate that we're in, it's just showing up even more and more. And so I am finding myself doing a lot of my own little, activism here and talking with companies here, because everyone needs to be treated with respect and everyone needs to get, quality therapy. Just go through. Oh, so let me just go back to, anyone have any experience using Graphica? No? You a little bit?
Never.
Okay. So like I told you, there are two different types. There's Lingraphica that I've used, and then there's Dynavox. And I'm just gonna, give you the short spiel. Dynavox is a lot more complicated. You can do a lot of things with it. I've had a patient that has had, she's had ALS. And I mean, she can't do anything. But the great thing about using her the Dynavox is that she's a more higher level patient. So I would use Dynavox for somebody someone that's really into the internet, that's really into technology, someone that's still going about their everyday life, right? She did even though she had ALS, she used her Dynavox device to do school, to email her teachers, to meet with her groups, to pay her bills. I mean, it was that deep, for her. And the Dynavox, that computer system worked very well for her everyday life. And I'm telling you, it's as serious as when that device wasn't working, it really affected her quality of life. So if you have patients, and this is just, we don't have that long of time, so I'm just kind of giving you guys like snippets here. But if you have patients that are higher level, patients that are, active in their everyday life and are very technology savvy, Dynavox would work for them. It would work for them. And if you have patients that have lost their fine motor, she doesn't have she can't use her hands at all. So Dynavox has a accessory where you can blink your eyes and you can look at a particular icon and it can say whatever it is. She can pay her bills with it. So I've had to work, I mean, uh, we, I'll tell you, it took probably a good 4 months to really get her going on her device and having to call representatives. I mean, sometimes these things can be, you know, tedious sometimes, but right, as therapists, we do what we have to do. I would encourage you to do your paperwork when it comes to that report, to bill for it and do it with the patient and just go through it like it's a regular session. I'm not gonna, don't take that report home because you're gonna spend a lot more time, doing that report at home when you can sit there and just kind of go through it and, or at least get most of it done before you leave. But Dynavox, I would say, are more for, they have lower level devices. And I can't exactly tell you which device she had. I can't remember the actual name of it at this point of time, but I would consider Dynavox as a more higher tech device than Lingraphica devices. Now, Lingraphica devices, if I can use them, anybody can use them. I don't consider myself someone that's very tech savvy. My patients love using the Lingraphica. It's very easy. You can learn it in 30 minutes. It's almost the same couple of steps, and once you have those steps down, you just kind of build on top of what you know already. It is not a complicated device already. So if you are one of those people that are like me, that's very shy when it comes to technology, I would encourage you to look into Lingraphica. Lingraphica also allows you to have a trial. So with Lingraphica, they give you a 3-week trial. And so what happens is you'll go in, you'll evaluate the patient, and then I've worked with them so often, they'll send the device to you, you'll take the device, and of course you teach the patient and you leave it with them. And so every time you come to see the patient, you're working on teaching the patient and the family how to use the device. But the main thing to remember about Lingraphica is that number one, they'll give you CEUs. If you're low on CEUs, they give you free CEUs, and like they're worth a lot. I want to say like 6 hours or so, like trials. So if you are low on CEUs and you want CEUs, go to Lingraphica because you can rack up on their trials pretty quickly. But not only that, they're just more customer service savvy and friendly. One of the things that I hate is if I don't know how to use your device, I don't want to have to spend hours on the phone. As therapists, we don't have that time, right? With Lingraphica, you can get somebody on the phone. They've, all of the time, you're not waiting. Your representative in your area will get on a meeting with you. And not only that, because what I've learned is that the little time that we come, if you come once or twice a week, that's really not enough time to teach the patient how to use it. But they have a system now to where their SLPs also will work with the patient within the week while you're working with the patient. So that's more reinforcement time. So if I'm not paid to say this, of course. If there's any company that I like using, it is Lingraphica. The only time I don't use Lingraphica is if the patient needs if the patient can't use their fine motor and they need to use a device that goes with their eye gaze, then I refer them to Dynavox. And also if that patient is technology savvy, on a higher level. So those are the two that I've used. There's of course in the Black, there's a stigma, with using the devices. But once your patients see how well how well they're able to communicate, I think it's such a refreshing and such a rewarding it's so rewarding to be able to see the life difference, the difference that it makes in a person's life. I had a patient that was this is a few years ago, probably my early experience in using AAC. He was an architect and he built their house. He had ALS At the time that I met them, he was 4 years within, he was bedbound. He couldn't communicate at all. And they used like a sheet of paper with like letters to communicate, literally. Like that's how low tech and how low level the communication system was. And a lot of times they couldn't tell what he was trying to spell out. So it was always a problem. And so I think for me, the rewarding thing was just being able to get them a device. And the first thing that he said to his wife was, "I love you." And I just thought that that was so, he hadn't said, "I love you." We hadn't been able to communicate that verbally in 4 years, And so this is, on my days where I get kind of like, okay, I'm tired of y'all, on my days where I'm just like, okay, speech therapy, you're getting on my nerves. These are the experiences, or these are the moments that make everything so rewarding, right? And you realize as a therapist how much you are really making you're really making a difference in the lives of people. And so that, I think that was out of my case. I think that was probably the one that just really, touched me, and it encouraged me to continue to learn, to use the devices. I'm at the point now where I can, before I had to get a representative to come in, now because I know how to use Lingraphica, I don't have to wait on the representative to help. And trust me, like I say, when I'm not tech savvy, I am not the tech guru. That is not me. And so if you're very shy when it comes to using the devices, I'm just gonna, the only way that you can learn how to do it is by jumping in. Okay, so just jump in. They have representatives that will definitely help you, because they want to, they want to help you. They want to get people their devices. And just for us in the Black community, I cannot stress how important it is just to continue to model, the fact that your loved one can say yes or no, or I want a steak, or I want, I don't want that is a big thing. And once, once someone can really see the difference it makes, it's worthwhile for them to be able to sit there with their loved ones. Now, trust me, I have had a lot of, you get a lot of pushback. And it's just because of lack of education. We already have this, we already have these statistics when it comes to treatment and allied health, or just the medical field at all. We already know that, Black people, the statistics are much lower for us when it comes to medical treatment, and so, expect the pushback. But I'm telling you, when you build that rapport and you actually show them, hey, this is going to make your life simple. Like, one of the goals for one of my patients, she wanted her mother to be able to tell her when she needed to use the bathroom. And so when you have your communication device and it can actually say it, she can actually point and it says bathroom, okay, well, great. That's less time that, she doesn't go on herself. So I'm not changing her more, it makes my life easier. These are things that really make a difference. Not only does it make a difference, and it makes them less stressed. Less stress means more, more meaningful interaction. And, how it is when you're stressed, and, when caregivers are overly stressed, right? And so those are, kind of what I have to say about AAC. I'm going to kind of shift now and kind of talk more about the compassionate side. Talk about compassion.
Dr. Blessing, before you shift, but this would be the time to ask a few of the questions that are in the chat.
Oh, I'm sorry.
First is, are there grants for AAC through the company?
There are grants. I've had patients that, so what happens a lot of times is that Medicare pays for 80%. And then there's normally a secondary insurance. And if there isn't, there are companies that they find, they'll help you find funding. So, as therapists, if the patient says, oh, I don't have the money, Medicare and Medicaid, they do help pay. Like I can't even think of a patient that haven't had funding. So don't let funding be something that kind of, deters you or deters the patient. There's funding.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you may have answered this, but were the company AAC reps not SLPs, or they were?
Okay, so they are SLPs.
Okay.
So so initially when I first started, initially when I first started with AAC, it was with Dynavox, and the representative was not an SLP, right? He was just familiar on how to use the device, but it makes the experience more enriching, much enrichful, like when you have someone that is an SLP. So now when I with both companies, they have people that are SLPs. So they do help you. There used to be times where the report would take 2 hours initially. This was a few years ago. Now the report is only taking 30 minutes because everything is electronic and it's online, and it's SLP friendly. If I'm not, and trust me, sometimes the billing when it comes to that report, the time that you would have taken to do the report is not, doesn't match with the billing. Let's just put it like that. So that's why I encourage you to, if you have the report and if it's going to take you extended amount of time, make sure that time is in their therapy time so that you can bill for it. Yeah.
Thank you. There was a question of what's your typical patient age and diagnosis, and what are the types of activities you do?
Okay. So most of the people that I have that with most of the diagnoses have been like ALS or stroke, severe, when they have stroke, and then they have like a severe expressive aphasia. So if you have somebody that has a mild impairment, Medicare will not even pay for it. The impairment has to be at least moderate or moderately severe. And so some of the activities that I do, so you see how you guys have these different squares. A lot of times what I go through is I have them do yes and no questions. I'll may point to an icon, and I have them, is this a cup? Is this a book? The same activities that you would do in regular therapy, you can do with the communication device. Following directions. So what I would do if I want to teach them how to change a particular icon, I turn that into a direction following task. Okay, the first thing that I want you to do is do this. The second thing is do this. And so it's everything that you could do. You're just doing it with a communication device. They even have different tasks on here on the devices. They have oral motor exercises. They have really up the ante as far as just helping us as therapists to have different tasks on there. But there's so much, everything that you can think about. If you think about a goal that you can do with in regular therapy, you can basically do it on the AAC device. So
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Blessing.
Yeah. Okay.
Continue.
So sorry if I kind of feel I'm a little nervous. So, so sorry if I'm kind of all over the place. I'm just kind of giving you guys, trying to go with what I have here. So we're going to talk about compassion, and I just want to read to you guys this definition for compassion, and then I just want to talk to you guys about about an experience that I had that I would probably say out of all of I told you about the guy that was just like a moment for me, but this experience I would say out of all my experiences that I've had, this experience that happened last what was it, Labor Day, around that time, I'd probably say, were you able to demand money? I'm sorry, I just saw something in the chat. So just hold on and I'll try to get to that question. This experience really changed, it really just was just life-changing for me. And so let me give you guys this definition. Compassion is defined as sensitivity shown in order to understand another person's suffering, combined with a willingness to help and to promote the well-being of that person in order to find a solution to their situation. Okay. Now we all know that this should be the duty of all healthcare professionals. Okay. And so when you're talking about, compassion, and I said this a little bit, before, if you look at somebody and you can see yourself in them, or you can, excuse me, you can see yourself in them, or your heart sympathizes with them, right? That the humanity in them, if you can see the humanity in them, you can service them. But if you can't even see the humanity in the person or have a heart for the person, then how can you provide services? How can you provide quality speech therapy services? If I'm just in here, I'm going to get a check, and you don't see this person as a human being, right? So we look at everything that has happened with Black Lives Matter, especially last year, and everything with the pandemic, right? And then we look at our field, and we know that our field is predominantly white. And we look at our field, and we see some of the, we've all had those different experiences in our field when you're talking, even in departments or going through grad school, or you see the cultural insensitivity, right? And we know that these are the same people that are going out and they're working with our children. Not only are they working with our children, but they're also working in our communities, right? So if you don't have a heart, if you don't have compassion, how can you really provide the quality services, that they need? And so I had a situation, and this is, let me go back. This is why it's so important in our field, why gatekeeping really needs to be dealt with. Because what happens is, for me, I've been asked, oh, why do you want to work in the city? Why do you want to look? I love working in the city. I love working in the hood. I'm an SLP and I work in the hood, and that's what it is. And I love it. Okay. And so I love working with my people. And when I go out and work in other areas, I get called the police on me. I get racial, like I've had some interesting experiences that I'm not going to go into all of them now, but just imagine. Okay. I've had situations where I've called people and have made appointments. I go to them and they can't believe the voice that they heard versus with the person that they see, with them, in front of them, right? And so, working, like I said, I love working in the city. And when it comes to gatekeeping, what ends up happening is, in our field, when you start to gatekeep to where everybody in the field looks the same, or you're trying to root out specific groups of people, there is a shortage. There ends up actually being a shortage in the field, right? Because some of these girls or guys, they don't want to go and work. Like, they don't want to, like, literally, I've worked in the inner city of Chicago and in Gary. And if you know anything about Gary, Indiana, you know it's rough and it's the hood, right? But people that look like me are, I'm not saying all the time they want to go and work with people that look like them. But what I am saying is that once you gatekeep and you push for a specific group of people to be in this field, then you're shortchanging a lot of people that could be getting some great healthcare. And that's what I've noticed, because there are not enough speech therapists in home health, let alone Black speech therapists. And what happens, the white speech therapists or the Indians or the Asians don't want to go in the Black neighborhoods. So now you've just shortchanged communities, neighborhoods, right? Children that can't get services. And how does this, this kind of rolls into when you think about preschool and you think about education, right? If you can't get early intervention services and you're trying to help your child, and they're going, they're moving from grade to grade, this has lasting effects. And so, this really working in the inner city really showed me that, because the calls that I'll get is, I can't, no one wants to go out there. You're the only person that, wants to, well, how many people did you not? And then you think back, I wonder how many people that actually qualified didn't really get into grad school that maybe looked like me, that would have came and serviced this area. Do you see how all of that kind of, all of that plays a big effect on, on services, right? And so the situation that I had this past summer, I had a patient, and the patient lived, and they call it the hot 100s. If you know anything about the inner city of Chicago, it's like the Roseland neighborhood. And so I had a particular patient. The patient was receiving occupational, physical, and speech therapy. And, for me, it was just, it's just a regular day. I've seen this patient before. the particular therapist that was on the case, I did not know him. And so, you know, this is a time I understand that people are, you know, it's during the summertime when COVID, it was like the first summer of COVID, you know, so we're still, I'm not saying that we're not on guard, but, and it doesn't actually excuse his behavior. So I had a situation where I went in, you know, and I, like I said, I know the family. So I went in and I get there and the wife is talking to me and she kind of expected me. She's like, oh, I can understand if you don't want to come to our house again. And I was kind of like thrown off, like, why would I not want to come to your house, you know? And she's like, oh, well, the physical therapist, he called the police on us. And I'm like, what? You know, and she's like, yeah, the police just left. And I was like trying to process the words that were coming out of her mouth, like, you know, the police just left your house. She's like, yeah, he called the police on us. And I'm like, okay, tell me what happened. And she said he thought we gave him COVID. And I'm like, what? You know, it just sounded so crazy to me. And so let me just describe to you guys what this house looks like. And this is just important so you just kind of know the mind frame of the person that was working with them. So it's a house, it's a 2-level house. They have different doors. Okay. And it's one family that owns the top apartment and the bottom. They own the entire house. So there is a different door that you go in the first floor versus and you go in the upstairs apartment. And what happened was the patient's mother-in-law had COVID. And so she had been quarantining, and they're not even really sure how the therapist found out, but they have been quarantining from her, so she doesn't come around them. And like I said, they have different doors, so it's not like they share a hallway or anything like that. And so what the patient told me was that the physical therapist came in, he did his treatment, he left and called the police and told the police that the patient gave him COVID. And so the police had to come to the patient's house. And, the police can't take you to jail. You know, the police can't take you to jail for COVID, or, even if they gave you COVID, he can't take you to jail for that, And so what happened was he felt like he was exposed to COVID. Now, you all know that CDC protocol is, even there's protocol for CDC, and then there's actual protocol for home health facilities. So if you ever felt that you came in contact with someone that had COVID, the first thing that you're supposed to do is you're supposed to call the home health company, because you don't know if there are other therapists that are coming behind you. You call, and then they call and they do the reporting. You don't call the police. That's just common sense. This is a white male. He called the police. The police came. They told the police nothing happened to him. And, nothing happened to him. They don't know why he called the police. He just felt like they exposed him. And she explained to the police officer, like, my mother-in-law has it, but she's in a whole totally different apartment. And so when I got there, she explained this to me. And when I tell you, it enraged me so bad. Like, I could not wait. It was, it was the weekend of Labor Day. And I could not wait to get done working with them, because when I tell you, I wanted to light a fire somewhere. Okay. When I tell you, I was ready for all of the smoke that day. And the home health company had actually closed. And so I knew exactly what it was. Like, you cannot tell me that it was anything else, because I was coming after the patient. If you were concerned that the patient had COVID or exposed you to COVID, you would have called the home health company so they can tell me, Blessing, do not come to the house. But you were so mad that you felt like, number one, we're talking about in the hood. We're talking about in a time period where George Floyd just happened not too long ago. Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, all these cases just happened. I'm sorry, I know I'm trying to keep with the time. Just happened, right? And so you call in Chicago, in the area that I was in is a hot area, and you call the police on a Black man, a patient, because you thought that could have ended so badly on so many levels. Do you understand? And so I got done treating the patient. I apologized to them and I told them that I would take care of it. And at that moment, I knew that within myself, this company has two choices. They're either going to fire him or I am going to quit. Like there's no conversation. There's no, how can we rectify the situation? You're going to fire him because he did that because he was Black. And you cannot tell me otherwise. Because if he was concerned about the lives, about anybody's life, he would have reported it to the company. But he didn't even call the home health agency. So when I got done treating, I called the agency and I spoke with the DO when it was after hours, and I called her, I called her actual cell phone and I said, hey, we have a situation. And I told her what happened and she could not believe it. She's like, wait a minute, let me check the files. She checked the files to see if there was no calls. He didn't call them at all. He didn't let them know. He didn't make a report, nothing. This is what I'm talking about when we talk about compassion. How can you treat people when you can't, like, you don't even see this man as a human being. You know that a white man that calls the police on a Black man in a hot area of town, you wanted some type of justice. You wanted something to be done because you felt like this man exposed you to COVID, period. And so they did a little bit of calling, they will call you back. They did some calling and they fired him that same day, and I didn't feel bad about it or anything, at all. I'm just thinking this was such a crazy case, but how this probably, I'm not saying this, not this exact situation, but how many times, when you think about all the craziness that's happened in the world, that is even trickling down in the work environment that we're in as therapists. I never thought that I would see, of course, we know that discrimination occurs in the medical field, but to see it so overt and to see somebody that I'm working with actually do that to another patient when we're supposed to, be here to deliver services and to help our patients in every way that we can, and you call the police on the patient. And so that really got my wheels turning. And of course he got fired, but that is really why it's just so important, because he could not make the connection with him and who he was as a person to the patient. He couldn't have seen him as a man or as a person that was important. He couldn't dignify him. All he knew is that if I call the police, I'm in a hot area of town, somebody is going to jail. My patient could have ended up dead for something so totally stupid. That sounds so far-fetched, but it really happened in real life. And so as therapists, I felt like for me at that time, it was very serious, and you don't have I'm a Black woman, he's a Black man, this is my patient, you're going to make this decision. You can either keep him or you can, or I leave. There are no choices. And I'm glad they made the right decision and the company apologized to me. And I felt very justified and very, and very happy. But these are just some of the life, lessons. This changes your whole, when you talk about healthcare and you talk about, providing services, this is part of the work that we have to do as therapists. I didn't, any person could have just been like, man, I can't believe they did that and left it there. But when I go back in through this definition and talk about compassion, and it talks about, in order to understand another person's suffering, combined with the willingness to help and to promote the well-being of that person in order to find a solution to their situation. And so as therapists, not only are we finding a solution to their situation with their language needs, but it's in everyday life. And this was just something that manifested in this particular time, but it is our duty as healthcare professionals to do the right thing. And so that was that. That was the situation that definitely, I think, I'm doing some writing about it. and you'll probably see it in the article or somewhere, but I'm doing some writing about it, and the importance of gatekeeping and how gatekeeping, has trickled down to how it trickles down and how it impacts the people that are able to be reached in healthcare, and the quality of healthcare, and the importance of compassion, because I feel a lot of times in speech, I don't know if some of you are some of these different uh, face Facebook groups, but the lack of compassion or the rudeness of when people are asking questions. If you can't even answer a question that a clinician doesn't know with decency and care, how can you deliver quality services to patients that are here to learn from you? And there is this whole disconnect, and I think in our field where I have to have the right answer, or I have to be the first one to do this, and you see when people post questions, and sometimes the meanness, and it's like, how can you provide services? You can't even answer a question in a decent way to someone that doesn't know. So how much more are you going to, how are you going to treat your patients? And so that's kind of, my area of interest at this point, and what I'm kind of doing some work in, and working with different agencies in our area, really, when it comes to this cultural competence, and and how we treat people, especially in underserved communities. So yeah, I don't know if there are any questions so far.
Daria, are there any other questions from the chat?
First and foremost, thank you, and God bless you for your compassion. It just resonated to me, and it's so unfair that something like that could happen to that patient, especially in the height of everything that was going on with last year. But there is another question. Someone asked, were you able to demand more money with your doctorate?
Oh, so my doctorate is in educational leadership rights. And so when it comes to home health, I work for myself. That doesn't trickle down in home health. I can tell you where it does trickle down. And, when you start getting, approached for positions, like people wanting you to be the director of the agency, or running the agency, or that's where those things really trickle down. But my doctorate, because you all know that I started a SLPA program here. And so that really is what fueled I have a passion for education. It doesn't matter what type of education it is, just for general education. And so, I see myself doing, I'm one of those, probably will be a homeschool mother type of things when I become a mom. But my doctorate wasn't for me to demand more money in home health. Now, it does help in other areas, in speaking engagements, and it does trickle down when you're talking about running other people's companies, and that's where it does that's where you can ask for more money. So yes and no. If you're working in the school system, and I don't work in the school system right now, but if I'm working in the school system, I think I have more leeway with a doctorate, of course. For those of you that have worked in the school system, but you can do more. For me, I just thought it was worth my while to do a doctorate in educational leadership, versus in speech pathology, because speech is so centered and if you know exactly that you want to work in speech pathology. I knew that I wanted to work in speech pathology, and I wanted to have a wide array of options for me. And so that's kind of why I did it in educational leadership, because it just kind of trickles down in other areas as well. Yeah, but not in home health.